Like so many before me, I built my main town right here, right next to Haerndean, and now I want it moved here. To move all of my buildings, I chose to travel to my new base location after clearing the bandit camps nearby. Open up my map, hover over my existing buildings, and then click the relocate button to place them in the new area. You and your workers will disassemble at the original location, which will teleport those build items to the new construction site. Your workers will also travel to the new construction site to finish the structures there. I did some brainstorming on creating a new settlement and using caravans to send over items and supplies, but when it came down to it, my brain saw a relocate button and I want to explore how efficient it is just going in headfirst. Before we go moving all of our buildings, there are a few essential things we must do beforehand to prepare for the move. First and foremost, make as many carpenter's hammers as you have villagers, or even more. You always want them available in surplus, as they are going to break, be misplaced, and the buildings responsible for creating and repairing them may not always be available when you're moving. You can buy spare hammers at the carpenter's tent south of Haerndean. Kind of hit or miss, might have one. And any extras left over after the move that you've built can easily be sold on caravan routes for profit. It's a good idea to have a storage for hammers and food at both locations to avoid any unnecessary travel by your workers when they're in need of either tools or meals. Additionally, making a bag for each citizen will greatly decrease how long it takes to move all of your stored items over to the new location. Next, we're going to take a screenshot of our existing priorities and then change everyone's top priority to construction. If you turn off all other priorities, I'd recommend you at least have one person set to crafting so they can repair your hammers. It's also a good idea to turn off hold ground to avoid unnecessary fights when your workers are traveling, or you can adjust worker gear presets to include armor and weapons. One thing I would definitely recommend, which I did not do, is to have your basic villager preset include a carpenter's hammer. As long as you have enough hammers, this will ensure your workers will never have to search for one unless there's breaks. Alright, now that we've built the tools for the job, prepared food for our workers, and adjusted their priorities, let's cover the order in which I chose to move my buildings. Before I moved any buildings, I drew a rough layout of my new placements. This absolutely changed as I started to get deeper into the move, but I cannot stress how helpful this was to keep me on track. For example, I knew I wanted to place all of my houses on beachfront property, but with the increased construction proximity, I couldn't organize them all at the same time. Instead of waiting for each one to get finished, I was able to reference my sheet, place a few roads for guidance, and then focus on a separate part of town to keep the process flowing. I focused on big buildings first, with smaller stations saved for later when I could slot them in between the larger structures. I chose non-essential buildings first, like my town hall, tavern, after stocking up a lot of food, library, and whatever else wasn't keeping my chickens alive or repairing my hammers. I also started to move my houses, so some villagers would start the day there and work on constructing at the new site. For houses, villagers will sleep anywhere when homeless, but will always travel back to their residence at the end of the day if they have one available. In the morning, they will travel wherever food is, so remember to have food nearby both locations like we discussed earlier. The middle of the relocation order got a bit blurry as I moved my resource gathering and crafting buildings. When moving the toolmaker, the building responsible for repairing carpenter's hammers, it's a good idea to focus on finishing that construction as soon as possible, so it's up and available for repairs once again. I also moved my weaver's hut in right after that, so the rope required for repairing the hammers could be made for that same purpose. Then onto my storage barns and food cellars. As you deconstruct any building that is storing items, the items are saved at the original construction site. A helpful tip, at a certain point, I did not need this many items, so if you fill up your inventory, go to whichever item you don't need or are just sick of looking at, and just start spamming. It will create a loot bag on the ground. Your workers will not come get this automatically as it's no longer part of your settlement, and after a day it'll just despawn and you don't have to worry about 500 pelts and 300 chicken wings. I contemplated turning off deliveries as a job priority as I noticed a lot of workers moving items instead of building, but ended up leaving it on due to the sheer volume of what I had to move alone. It was also unclear if they were making deliveries a top priority because the items were present at a construction site, which was technically their first priority. If you explore this more, let me know in the comments. I also moved my caravan station at this time, and learned that you should probably turn carts to 0 at the new location until everything's done, or your workers will break focus and try to deliver items and craft new carts as the old ones are now lost. For last, I saved my bird's coop and livestock barn so that my animals weren't killed while homeless and had a place to eat food. Chicks will die after about 2 to 3 days from starvation and neglect, but full-grown chickens and pigs will do fine over multiple days with no food in storage. Your fully grown animals will also get stressed from overpopulation, so you might have to get your hands dirty. When it was time to move my bird's coop and livestock barn, I waited until all other constructions were finished to ensure their home was the main priority of construction, and all of my workers would help rebuild them as fast as possible. I brought some companions to help out, but they instantly left, so I stayed and finished up on my own. This ended up working out because as I sent materials back by deconstructing, my workers were already rebuilding at home. On my way back with my animals, I also discovered that you can apparently fast travel with your animals. With this in mind, the chicken's coop was a breeze, and I got an early start deconstructing so my workers could start the day rebuilding at the new site. And by the time I fast traveled home with my chickens, my workers made good progress on the coop and my animals were back at home in no time at all. I moved my farms last because they were going to be on the outskirts of town and take up quite a bit of space. Luckily, they transport instantly, which is great, but you do lose all crops that you were growing there before relocating. As you approach the last few buildings, remember to keep helping your workers deliver storage items so they can prioritize construction. I also started to relocate some of my smaller workstations now that my larger buildings were finished and I could slot them in nice and neat. As you start placing all of these buildings in whatever order you choose, workers will try to use them even as the settlement is divided, which required them to walk across the entire map for the resources. To avoid this, I went into my building management menu and turned off the individual building's priority itself. This is a lot easier than adjusting every job priority. Just remember to take a screenshot or write down what you had so you know where you were at when everything is finished. Besides determining building placements and relocation order, as the player, I made sure my villagers always had carpenter's hammers and food. Specifically, this meant checking their inventory for broken hammers to repair myself, and delivering food to both locations if they were running low. Once those two things were set, I was building and helping with deliveries non-stop. As the player, I chose to focus on constructing or deconstructing buildings at whichever location had the fewest workers present. This helps to ensure that I wasn't taking away nearby tasks for the majority of my workers, but even with this strategy in mind, remember to help them finish important structures like your toolmaker and weaver's hut. While moving your town, you might also get raided or have to defend against a reclamation party. I did not take the first reclamation party serious enough and barely made it through. Be proactive. Your workers are going to have to move a long way to gear up. This can be sped up if you've already switched your worker gear presets to the armor and weapons like we discussed earlier. Regardless though, get your butt over there, kill those bandits. After placing my final building and grabbing the last of my stored items to move over, I readjusted all of my citizens and my building's priorities back to normal, and in the morning, checked to make sure everything was running smoothly. I took a big sigh of relief as my citizens got back to work and the sun crested our new mountain view. Moving a town in Bellwright is a unique process, and depends on many variables like how many buildings and workers you have, what kind of buildings you have, how far you're moving, how many items you have stored, and the list goes on. Overall, it took me 15 days in-game for the full move, with just over 11 hours of footage to edit down in the end. Given I had a pretty much fully built out Tier 2 settlement, with all of my buildings or most of them requiring a carpenter's hammer and increased construction and deconstruction time with that. However, looking back, it was absolutely worth it. And having accomplished something that seemed so daunting, but ended up being simple although long-lasting in the end, I felt a renewed passion for the game. May you learn from my mistakes. Best of luck, keep on gaming.